Okay, so a couple things I just want to remind everyone of. When we're graphing sine and cosine, you got to remember some of the basics about them. And this is the things that we went over in the notes the other day. So sine, if you remember on your unit circle, at 0 radians, sine is 0. And then at pi over 2 radians, sine is 1. At pi radians, sine is 0 again, so we're back at 0 at pi. At 3 pi over 2, down here, sine is -1, so it's down here at -1, and then at 2 pi, sine is back at 0. And it actually does create this wave. So sine does this, it starts at the origin, goes up, reaches a max, comes back down. Scale's not great. Comes back down, reaches a minimum, and then goes back to 0. And then it will repeat that forever, and it'll just keep on going, and it'll keep on going, right? And then cosine at 0, 0 pi, 0 half pi pi, 3 halves pi, and 2 pi. At 0, cosine is 1. And then cosine is 0 at pi over 2. And then cosine is -1 at pi. And then back to 0, and then back to 1. So cosine wave actually looks like this. Although technically, I mean, it looks like this as well if it's a shift, because these are the same waves, they're just shifted pi over 2 away from each other. So when we think about sine, we always think about sine as starting at the origin, going up, and then coming back down. When we think about cosine, we think about cosine starting at the max, at the amplitude, coming down, coming back up, and then that would be a complete wave, because if you repeat yourself, the next one is just another wave. But once you start repeating, then you're into another wave. Okay? All right. So what we're going to do today is kind of an extension of what we did the other day. We're going to have vertical shifts, we're going to have amplitude changes, but we're also going to ask you to only graph on certain windows. So instead of just graphing one period, we're going to talk about just if I asked you to graph only from here to here, right? So this first one, graph the following on the given domain. And so I do expect to see these in your notes, all right? So first off, write down the function. Maybe pause it. It says f of x equals -2 cosine of x plus 3. And I only want you to graph on this window. So first let's talk shifts and amplitude. I know +3 is going to seem to be up 3 on the y-axis. And then an amplitude of 2, I'm going to ignore the negative for a second. An amplitude of 2 means I'm going to have to go 2 higher, which means I need to be able to at least see 5 up and then only 1 down. So I really only need to see, now I do want to say, like, number line right quick. Let's just think this out, okay? If this is 0 and this is half pi, and this is pi, 3 pi over 2, and then 2 pi. If I go backwards, that's negative pi over 2, negative pi, negative 3 pi over 2, negative 2 pi, right? So when I think about graphing this function, I'm going to have to graph it from negative pi over 2 until 3 pi over 2. So that's how much of the wave I'm going to see. So now I know how far left and right to go. So I'm going to go left to negative pi over 2. And then I'm only going to go right 3 tick marks because that'll put pi over 2. That'll put me at 3 pi over 2. So pi over 2, pi, and 3 pi over 2. Okay? I know my midline is at 3, so I'm going to go up 3. And I'm going to draw my midline. And then I'm going to go up 2 and down 2 from that. Up 2 isn't as tall. So, yeah. And then I'm going to draw amplitude lines across. Up 2 and down 2 from my midline. And then I'm going to sketch. Okay, so I know that cosine normally looks like this. So it starts up at the max, comes back down, and goes down, right? But I have a negative which flips it over the x-axis, so it should actually look like that. So I know that at 0, whenever I plot this, normally I would be up at the max, now I'm going to be at the min. So it's going to start down here, and then it's going to go to, up to half pi at the midline. And then at pi, it's going to be up at the max. And then so at halfway, pi, right, I should be at the max. 3 pi over 2, I come back down. So normally at 2 pi, I would go all the way down, but I don't want you to graph that way. I don't want you to graph all the way. I just want you to stop there. And then we'll just keep the wave going. So if it went up to pi over 2 in here, it's going to go up to pi over 2 there. Okay. And that is the sketch of my wave. So make sure to make your connections and do not do absolute value v's, okay? All right, now technically, none of this is part of the wave. So if I were actually to just graph this, you would just see that, okay? So let's go to the next one. On the next one, I have 4 sine plus 1, and I want you to graph it from negative pi to 3 pi. Okay, so again, I'm going to think about my amplitude and my vertical shift. I'm supposed to go up 1, and then have an amplitude of 4. So I'm supposed to go up 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, so that puts me at 5, and then down 4, this is my 1, but oh well, 1, 2, 3, 4, which puts me at negative 3. So that's what my plan is, and then I also know I need to go from negative pi to 3 pi. So when I think about my number line, right, so 0, I know 2 tick marks is pi because that's half pi, so then another 2 tick marks puts me at 2 pi, so another 2 tick marks put me at 3 pi. And then to go left pi, I know I need to go to the left 2 tick marks, so that's kind of what I'm thinking. So I'm going to give myself some space on either side, more space on the right. So I'm supposed to go left pi, and to the right 3 pi. So 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi. And then my amplitude, I'm supposed to go up 1. So up 1. And then, or my midline, I guess I should say, my vertical shift, and then have an amplitude of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that puts me at 5. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, that puts me at negative 3. So my midline is going to be at 1. And my amplitude lines are going to be 4 up and 4 down. And I've got a regular sine wave, so if I remember, sine starts at the center, because sine at 0, 0, or sine at 0, 0. Sine at 1, 0, at 0 radians is 0. So sine starts at 0, goes up, comes back down, and then does that, right? So that's normally between 0 and 2 pi. I haven't changed, it's not a negative, so we're going to go ahead and at the midline, it starts there. At the first tick mark, it should be up at the max. At the next tick mark, it should be at the midline. At the next one, it should be down below. And then at 2 pi, it should be back at the midline. And then I'm just going to keep it going until I have to stop. So up and then back to the midline. So there we go. We have 1.5 waves on this side, but then I'm supposed to go to negative pi, so go down. So just continue the wave. It went up, so let's go down, and then back to the midline. Okay, so we sketch. And here is our 4 sine plus 1, which ends up being 2 total waves. Okay, so last one. Negative 3/2 sine of x minus 4. Okay, so just thinking this out. I have a sine wave. I'm supposed to go down 4. So down 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm supposed to have an amplitude of 3 halves. So 3 halves is 1.5, so I'm supposed to go up 1.5 and down 1.5. So down 2 puts me at -6. So I'm here at -2.5 and -5.5. And okay, I need to graph from -7/2 pi to -1/2 pi. Cool. So I know that I'm only on the negative side, so I'm going to kind of plan that out. So here's 0. Every tick mark is a 1/2 pi, right? So if I go back a 1/2 pi, then back pi, back 3 pi over 2, and then back 2 pi. So after that, just remember, like, you're also counting by halves. So this is 1/2, 2 halves, 3 halves, 4 halves. So I need to go 5 halves, 6 halves, 7 halves, right? So it looks like I need to go backwards 3 pi and then another half. And so that would be -5/2 pi. Okay, so I need to go from here to here. Yeah? Okay, so I need to be below. I need to go down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So -4 is going to be my midline. Nah, I totally missed. I went too low anyway. I'll just fix it. So like this -4, halfway, yeah, halfway. Okay, and then my amplitudes are up 1.5 and down 1.5. I need to start from the axis, so I'm gonna start upside down. Okay. Dang, that is not straight, but oh well. Okay, so I need to go up 3 halves and down 3 halves, so yeah, up and down 1.5. And then I gotta plot my tick marks. Okay, so I need to go from -1/2 pi, 2 halves, 3 halves, 4 halves, 5 halves, 6 halves, 7 halves. Okay, so if I let this be -pi over 2, -pi, -3 pi over 2, -2 pi, -5 pi over 2, -3 pi, and then -7 pi over 2. I am only graphing from here to here, okay? So I need to think of my wave. I've got a sine wave that's normally sine waves look like this. I've got a negative sine wave, which means it does this, but I'm not actually looking at this side of it. I'm looking over here. So I'm going to kind of plan that out. So normally sine goes from here to here, but I'm going to go backwards, so it would go up first and then it would come back down. That right there is -2 pi. This right here is -pi, and this is -pi over 2. So that means my start of my wave should be at the max. Okay? So I know at -pi over 2, my max, or my wave is at its maximum. And then I know at -pi, it's at its midline. And once you have two pieces, I mean, you can just plot the rest by just following every tick mark, you go to the next spot. So I'm at the max, midline, I need to be at the minimum. I need to be at the midline, at the max, at the midline, and then at the min. So as long as you follow the pattern, you'll be fine. But this part right here, planning it out, is key. Okay? So in order to figure out how far left and right, I had to plot it out, right, how far I needed to go. And then over here, I went I flipped it, and then I kept going on the left, and then I plotted out what the points would be. So I know that at negative pi over 2, I should have been at max. And that gave me a starting point. Okay? All right, that's the end of the video.